This episode is sponsored by Follow Up Boss. And I know you, Justin, and Lindsay both know that I made the switch about a year ago to Follow Up Boss from being in one CRM for the last 13 years.
I read a stat the other day that 32 of the top 50 teams in the United States use Follow Up Boss already. So, I guess the proof's in the pudding there.
So whether you have a super team like George or a mini team like me, Follow Up Boss makes it super easy for teams of all sizes to get organized, stay on top of their leads and spheres with less effort, and improve overall performance so you can scale your business.
And thanks to FUB, all of our listeners can double their free trial and get a full 30 days to see how Follow Up Boss can level up your business. And there's no contract necessary, no credit cards required, completely free to give it a go. So visit followupboss.com/inspection period for more details. And thanks, Follow Up Boss, for making this possible.
Being highly introverted and going and doing this 90-minute presentation, which probably terrified you the first dozen times you did it, I don't know. But eventually repetition drives that challenge away. And so you just get to the agents that are scared to get out of their comfort zone and do these things over and over again. And I still have agents right now that I was talking to one this morning that she's like, I got the yips. I just can't bring up the buyer broker agreement. And I'm like, you're killing me. We've got to get repetitions and you got to get out of your comfort zone. You got to start having those financial conversations. So I just think it's cool to hear that early in your career, how you're challenging yourself in that.
Doing a listing presentation in someone's home, doing a buyer consultation, doing a timeshare presentation, I was fine. But in any larger group, it was not good. So it took me a long time. Actually, I did specific things to get over that, to the point where, years later, speaking, live in front of 19,000 people at one of our conventions, it didn't faze me. My pulse rate wouldn't change. Now it doesn't.
Yeah, I want to dig into that a little bit more, Chris, because I think a lot of people think that in order to be successful in real estate, you have to have this big, gregarious, outgoing personality, right? And I think that there's actually a lot to be learned from very different styles. I happen to be one of those big outgoing personalities that likes to talk
Lindsay?
to anyone.
No.
I mean, shocking.
Not you.
But I'd love to hear more about what you did, because I actually have a small group coaching program and it's a wide variety of people in it. And some of the things are people, not everyone is naturally as outgoing. So talk me through, what are some of those things that you did to be able to make that transition from being terrified to have a listing presentation to speaking to 19,000 people at one time?
How the hell did an extreme introvert get through Keller Williams' BOLD program?
Yeah, a lot of work between the younger years and those years. It's interesting, Lindsay, you made me think of something. I knew I wasn't that, right? I knew I didn't have that big personality. The broker that recruited me had a huge personality, super charismatic, bigger than life. And so I knew I didn't have that. I knew I didn't have experience. I knew I wasn't the smartest kid in the room. I knew I didn't have any of those things. So then it came down, okay, how am I going to do this? How am I going to succeed? How am I going to win? And the only thing I had when I first started was, I think, two things: the willingness to do what it would take, and the ability to work as hard as anyone, harder than most, but certainly as hard as anyone. And so that my first year in the business, and I'm not recommending this, and understand this was a different time. This was before the internet, so I didn't have any resources. I didn't have any training. I didn't have any YouTube videos I could watch or podcasts I could listen to. So I literally just learned, the hard way through blood, sweat, and tears. And I literally worked 7 days a week. The broker was an ex-Marine, and he would get to the office, at 6:30 every morning to open it up. And I made sure I was the first one there. I was there before him. I made sure I was the last one walking out, at 8 or 9 at night. And that was for 365 days. That's what I did. Now, I was Rookie of the Year, sold 27 homes that first year. But, at the end of that year, it was I can't work anymore. I can't work any harder. how am I going to sell more homes? And then it was, the logical decision was I need to get someone to do some of the things I've been doing so that I have more time to be in front of buyers and sellers. So I hired an assistant at the end of that first year. And back then, no one had assistants. I was in an office of 80 agents and some very, very top agents. And when I hired an assistant, 80 people looked at me like, who's this kid? Like, Heller, who do you think you are? The president of the United States or something? Hiring assistants? Like, well, you've been stuffing envelopes for the last 5 hours. I'm going to pay someone to do that so I can be out selling more homes. It just made sense. But so, anyways, I digress. Lindsay, I did a couple things to help with the shyness and the being introverted. And by the way, if you're introverted, you're introverted. That doesn't change. But getting comfortable. There was first the realization that I had to develop versatility and flexibility, and I discovered that through doing listing presentations. I would go into a home, did the same presentation, right? It was very direct, very question oriented, focused on price, process, and take me 20 minutes. And sometimes it would go like clockwork. And at the end of 20 minutes, they got it, they understood, they trusted me, they respected me, they signed the agreement. I'd leave that, go to the next appointment, and it was like I was speaking a different language. And
yeah.
I'd walk out and go, what the heck happened? And what I realized, and then what I would do is I would call every seller who didn't hire me and say, hey, I understand you made a decision to hire someone else, and I wish you the best. I am 1,000% committed to getting better at what I do. And I would like you to honestly tell me, why you didn't hire me or what it would have taken for you to hire me. You have my permission to tell me the truth, say anything you want. I promise I won't take it personal. I just need to know. And in that feedback, I'd hear things like, well, we didn't feel you loved our house, or you weren't excited about it, or then, which is true, because I was there to get a listing sign, right, not fall in love with their house. But that made me understand, wow, I need to be able to make someone feel like I'm excited about, like I love their house. So then I just started really working on being versatile and flexible. So being like the people I was meeting with. I actually had an affirmation that I said to myself right before I knocked on the door. And it was always, it's showtime. And what that meant to me was, okay, whoever's going to open that door, that's who I need to be. And so that was one area. Then the other thing I did was to attack, my fears. I just started speaking, and the way I did it is I'd met a professor at the local junior college that taught real estate classes, and I asked him if I could come and speak to his class, and that continued on every semester for 16 years. And that was one of the ways I got more comfortable. And then over time, it's this, you learn and you grow and you realize things and have different experiences. But
I think that's really the affirmation piece there. I think is really important. Affirmations have been huge in my career. I read Ninja Selling my first month in real estate, and I did the 25 affirmations a day for 25 days and the whole thing. And I do think that what you tell yourself is so important, because your brain believes what you tell it to believe. So that's incredibly powerful for sure. But it's showtime. That's a good one.
Okay.
Just matching who you're meeting with, because I think, that rinse and repeat or doing the same thing, it just doesn't work for everyone. So meeting people where they're at and who they are, I think that chameleon kind of mentality sounds like it worked really, really well for you. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
And I love that, like, your answer. I was to be honest, I was expecting an answer like, I like hired a speaking coach or like started going to Toastmasters or something like that. But like you didn't do that. You just basically said, I need to do it. It's scary to me and I'm going to do it anyways because I know I need to improve here. And you just jumped into the deep end. Like teaching some freaking college class is your method to doing that. There's probably some less scary ways to go about it, but you jumped into a pretty scary environment, you know? You got all these young
Yeah.
eyes just expecting you to be brilliant.
Yeah. From early on, I've always I don't like waiting for things to happen. So
Yeah.
I've always had the mentality of running at them. So if there's something that's scary or frightening, I tend to move through it fast.
Where do you think you developed like that courage in your life? Because it takes a lot of courage to do that. You hear people say like, I want to be competent in something before I actually do it. But the reality is that like you don't get that competence until you have the courage beforehand. So like, how did you create that in your life?
You know, like when we're little, things happen and you know, you make up stories about them or they become your reality, and you know it's hard to discern which. I remember so the earliest memory I have of that is in elementary school, and I had a very good friend who kind of betrayed me, and there was a kid that was like the sort of the bully of the school, and he didn't know I was standing behind him, and he said to that kid, "Hey, you know ask Chris to fight. He'll chicken out." And he didn't know I heard that. So when that kid approached me, I couldn't. I don't know if I made the decision to say, "Yeah, I'll fight you. I'll show up." You know, so after school, you know, 60 kids gather around because there's going to be the big fight, and uh, unfortunately, he came up and he said, "Hey, I don't want to fight you," you know, and walked away, and that was it. But that was like I said yes to something that I knew I was going to get my butt beat. But because that friend said that, I couldn't not do it. And so from that time on, it's like, all right, I'm gonna show up. I'm gonna do it. So
That powerful motivator of when somebody tells you you can't do something. it's always it's always a good one. But I do think a lot of those like childhood experiences shape how we tackle behavior. Your relationship with fear is definitely probably comes back to those early experiences for sure.
yeah.
You mentioned that you hired an assistant at the end of your first year in real estate. That is also what I did actually before the end of my first year in real estate. And everyone thought it was pretty audacious to hire somebody at that point in my career. Tell us about how, I'm just more curious of like, how did you figure out what you needed? And then how have you continued to hire people around you to help kind of complement what your skill sets are so you can kind of stay doing what you do best?
Yeah.
How's that helped you?
Yeah. So like, early on, I didn't have a concept of any of that. The only thing I knew is I had to have more time to be able to be in front of buyers and sellers. So the first person I hired was, okay, all the things that took my time and that I didn't really like doing: answering the phones, paperwork, you know, doing flyers and stuffing envelopes and all that stuff, right? Like that's not important. What's important is me being in front of a buyer or seller. So the first hire was like this sort of common sense stuff, like, hey, here's what I should be doing and what I like to do and what I get paid to do, and I'm going to pay someone to do those other things. As time went on over the years, you know, you learn from your experience, learn from mistakes, and eventually I got to the point where I realized that if I was going to hire someone to do a task, a role, a job, that I had to make sure that they were every bit as good or better than me at that task, that role, or that job. Because if they weren't as good or better, I, I would never, I would always have to have a hand in it. I'd always, you know, or I'd have to accept that it wasn't going to get done at the level that I wanted to get done.
And as a reminder, inspection period listeners get a full 30-day trial of Bub. No contract, no credit card required. Just go to followupboss.com/inspection period for more details.